Joining us now to discuss that, Brigitte Gabriel, president of Act for America and author of the book Because They Hate. Also, Khaled Beydoun. He's an assistant professor at Barry University School of Law. Thank you both for being here. Brigitte, more and more we're hearing about how France has the biggest Muslim population in all of Europe, and yet it is very segregated and not assimilated. What role does that play here?
It plays a major role because we are seeing this in a lot of areas in Europe, not only in France. What happened in Europe is they opened up immigration to Muslim workers to come work, rebuild Europe after World War II. So these construction workers who came, not educated, they started settling in and working. Then they brought their families who were also not educated. So it was difficult for them to assimilate within French culture. To top it off, their ideology, their Islamic religion, they came from devout Islamic cultures, forbid them to assimilate into Islamic culture. The problem mushroomed. The French people did not pay attention to it, and actually all of Europe has not paid attention to it, and now they're paying the price.
Khaled, is this something special to France? I mean, we've seen assimilation in the United States and in some other cultures.
Well, I think it's important to note that France is the modern architect of Islamophobia, and you can't discuss you can't discuss assimilation without first discussing how the culture of both state-sponsored and societal bigotry towards Muslims has really marginalized.
What they do?
You know, the 5 to 10 million Muslims in France. They did a range of things. They passed the 2004 headscarf ban, the 2010 niqab ban. You know, considerable legislation. Even before then, that really stigmatized and marginalized Muslims in France.
How are the French people, before I go back to Brigitte, supposed to get these Muslims to assimilate into their country, to become Frenchmen as opposed to Muslims?
Well, I think, first of all, we have to view French assimilation as being considerably distinct from American assimilation, right? In the France model, they essentially pose an ultimatum. You're either French or Muslim. There's no hybridized, hyphenated identities like we have here in the States. And that's a difficult decision for anybody, right? I mean, individuals latch onto the religions and their faiths really tightly. Another note is that we talk about the freedom of expression, but there's no free exercise of religion in France, especially for Muslims. So these are core principles, I think, that can be eliminated from the discourse.
Brigitte, is that true?
Absolutely not true. I mean, look, there are so many different people from different cultures and different religions that immigrate to France and to different countries around the world. How come they assimilate? I mean, I can tell you from my own country of Lebanon, millions of people fled and they settled in France and they assimilated into French culture. French culture is open-minded. They are tolerant just like any other Western culture. The problem is with Islamic immigration, no matter where they go, whether Australia, America, Canada, Europe, they are not assimilating, and to the contrary, the second generation is even becoming more radical than the first generation. So this is a problem coming from the Islamic culture itself and their ideology, and has nothing to do with the nonsense Islamophobia that Arab pundits come on television and give us, and it's time to throw political correctness in the garbage where it belongs and start calling a spade a spade.
Khaled, when you speak with French people, and I know some French people, they say it is not as you say. They say that they would love to see these Muslims integrate into the community, but that they don't want to, that they want to hold on to, that their lives are all about being Muslim. They don't understand why they want to even live in Paris, France, when they don't seem to want to partake in the culture at all.
Well, how do you explain the first victim of the attack, right? Ahmed Murabat, a policeman, an everyday citizen. You know, how do you explain Mustafa Arad, who was an editor with the magazine?
Well, we're not talking about all Muslims. We're not talking about. I don't think anybody's talking about all Muslims. We're talking about there are these pockets around Paris, France, where the Muslim groups tend to live, and they don't live in French proper, and they don't integrate and assimilate with the other French.
Well, much of that is structural, right? And what you're talking about are called the banlieues. These are ghettos that are on the outskirts of French cities. These individuals are utterly segregated from urban spaces, from cosmopolitan centers. So it's much of it is the French model of building these essentially distant and alienated ghettos that don't give immigrants, not only Muslims. Also note that anti-Semitism in France is really strong. Anti-Roma sentiment in France is really strong. Anti-Asian sentiment in France is really strong. Anti-Hindu sentiment in France is really strong. So I don't want to, exceptionalize anti-Muslim animus.
And yet, there are pockets of those groups that wind up killing people for cartoons. I'll take the last word on that one.
Was that a question?
I mean, there's something there's something about the Muslim groups in France and elsewhere
Muslim groups,
that makes them
Muslim
do it.
groups in France, Megan, there are 751 no-go zones. 751 no-go zones in France where 5 million Muslims live. 5 million Muslims, no other religions. Why? How come everybody else is assimilating and they are not assimilating?
Right.
And by the way, we're having these zones pop up in the United States as well.
Panel, great debate. Thank you both so much.